So welcome to How Become an Appium Desktop Ninja. My name is Wim Selles and I'm a Senior Solutions Architect at Sauce Labs. This video will be part of a series of 6 videos where we look into what you need to know to become that Appium Desktop Ninja. In this video, we're going to focus on how to set up and explore Appium Desktop by connecting it to an Android emulator and an iOS simulator. When you start with Appium Desktop, you first need to download it. And you can download it from github.com/appium/appium desktop and then releases. On this page you will find all the versions of Appium Desktop. You will find the latest stable release and you can also find a beta release. But in this case we're going to use the latest stable release, and here you have the option to download a version for Linux, to download a version for a Mac, and to download a version for a Windows machine. I already downloaded Appium Desktop to my local machine, so I'm not going to do that in this session, but just click on the link that you need and download it for your OS that you're using. So now that we've downloaded Appium Desktop to our local machine, we need to start it. And as you can already see here, I already started Appium. So let us first explore the screen. And I will zoom in a little bit. In this case, we will have 3 tabs. We will have a simple tab with all the default configurations for starting Appium together with Appium Desktop. We will have an advanced tab where we could change ways on how the server needs to be started, the Appium server needs to be started, and we have presets. Then we would have the Start Server button where we can just start with the defaults or with the advanced features that we've set up, and we have edit configurations. And I will dive into each tab now. Let me just enlarge my Appium Desktop screen a little bit. And as I mentioned, the simple tab is just using the defaults, and this is 9 out of 10 times the configuration that you can use on your machine. It will use host 0.0.0 and it will use the default port, which will be 4723. You can just click on the Start Server and then it will work. But if you encounter some challenges, some issues with starting Appium Desktop, or you need to adjust certain things, like for example a different port, because this port is always being used on your machine, you can change it here, or you can go to the Advanced tab. And in the Advanced tab you will have all kinds of options in how to start, first of all, the Appium server, and also to tell the Appium server which defaults it needs to, which options it needs to use for iOS and also for Android. If you would like to change certain things here, you can change them. And if you don't want to change them all the time, you can say save as preset, give it a name, so just say preset, say save. You will get the option, you will get the notification here that your presets have been saved. You can click on the presets button and there you will see your preset. If you would click on the preset, you will see that all the options that you've adjusted will be shown here, and the Start Server button will be enabled. In this case I'm going to delete my presets because I'm not going to use a preset, I'm going to use the defaults. And now you will see that there is no preset available, so let me go back to the Simple tab. But before we start the Appium server, I first want to show you the Edit Configurations button. Because if you would click on this, you will get a pop-up. And you might remember in our previous video where we configured iOS and Android on our local machine that you need to set some Android home and Java home variables and put them in your system variables, your environment variables. If you're not able to do that on your local machine because you don't have the administration rights, you can also put them in here. So please take a look at the previous video on how to get the Android home and how to get the Java home, put it into here, save it, restart Appium Desktop, and then if you restarted it, the settings will be used from this setting from Appium Desktop. So for now I'm going to close this and I'm going to click on Start Server. And what you will get now is logs of Appium, the Appium server itself. And as you can see here, Appium started only with the relaxed security enabled, and it's running now on the local host on port 4723. You can also see there's a green line and also a green text, meaning that the server itself is running. And then in the right corner, the upper right corner, you will have three options. You have three buttons. First of all, you can stop the server. And the server can be used not only for using Appium Desktop, but if you would just keep your Appium server running here, you would have Appium in an isolated Node.js environment, and you can just use your framework telling it needs to connect to Appium, to the local host and on this port, and it will use this server. So you don't need to install a specific version of Appium on your machine. You don't need to provide a Node.js server on your machine, need to install that. No, you can just use Appium Desktop as a standalone version to run the Appium server. If you have run your test cases, you can also get the logs by clicking on Get Raw Logs, and a text file will be opened with all the logs. You will not see a lot of stuff happening now because we're not running test cases or we're not running a manual interaction with Appium Desktop. We can just close this one, and then last but not least, we can also start a new inspector session. And to start a new inspector session, we first need to have an emulator and a simulator running on our machine because we need to provide some capabilities. And if you might remember in the second video, I've added an extra configuration, an extra environment variable on my local machine, which was called emulator for Android. So I can now easily start an emulator from my command line. I don't need to start Android Studio. This will save me a lot of CPU and memory. So I'm going to start that emulator and it's already running now. We also need to have an iOS simulator. I already started that one, minimized it, and as you can see, it's now also running on my machine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start a new inspector session. And the inspector session, if we open this, we will get a new pop-up window. And that pop-up window will tell us more about what we can do with Appium Desktop. Because the first thing we need to do here is to configure our emulator and configure our simulator, which Appium can use to connect to and inspect it. But before we do that, I first want to highlight the tabs that you're seeing here. First of all, you would see the tab highlighted here, which is the automatic server. And the automatic server means that this inspector session will automatically connect to the Appium server, which is running in the background, as you can see here. And as you can now already see, we have an extra command here in comparison to the previous server window here. And that is Appium Desktop, just verifying with Appium, are you still alive, yes or no? Then we have the custom server. And the custom server is something which we're going to explore in our next video. Then we have select cloud providers, and as you can already see, I already enabled Sauce Labs here as a cloud provider, and this will be covered in our 5th video where we're going to use Appium Desktop and connect it to Sauce Labs, to a real device, and to an emulator and a simulator. So these are the tabs, and for now we're going to start using the automatic server. We also have some advanced settings if you might need to change something in the advanced part where you need to use a proxy or need to authorize certificates and allow unauthorized certificates. You can change it here. Click on the checkboxes and they will be used when you start the connection with the device. Then what you need to do is you need to provide capabilities, and see this as using your Selenium script or using an Appium script. We just need to tell the Appium server which device it needs to use. So we need to provide, for example, a platform name. We need to provide a OS version. We need to provide the device name. We need to provide an app. Those are all kinds of things that we need to provide and tell Appium Desktop which device it needs to start. Then you also see saved capability sets here. And I'm going to show you that later on. And then last but not least, we also have the option here to attach to a session. This is something which will only work from your local machine, where you can attach Appium Desktop to a already running automated session. I'm not going to cover that in the videos, and I think it's a nice investigation maybe also for you to explore extra things within Appium Desktop. But let me get back to the desired capabilities, because we now want to connect to, for example, the Android emulator. To start doing that, you can go to the desired capabilities documentation. If you would click on this, a URL will be opened from Appium with all the capabilities which you can use. What we need to do here is we can provide the platform form name, which will be a text string, and then we will provide the name. In this case, it will be Android. Then we need to provide the platform version. The platform version is also a string, and in this case it will be 10.0 because I started this emulator, as you can see here, with Android 10. Then we need to provide a device name, which will be device name, and this will also be a string, and this will be the same name as we called our emulator. In this case, it's pixel_3_10.0. This is the name that Appium Desktop will use, or Appium will use, to connect to that emulator that we want to use. Then, last but not least, we also need to provide an app. And you can say here, for example, browser, so it will connect to Chrome, or you can provide an app. And in this case, just provide a string, an app, not just provide the capability app. And you have the option to provide a full path by providing a string, or you can even change it by saying file path. And when you click on this one, file path, a pop-up window will be opened. And in this case, I'm going to use the Android SaaS Labs mobile sample app.apk. If I would click on that one, you can already see here that the path has been added, and it has also been added to the JSON representation here. Then what I always try to do here, if the app is already installed, I would say no reset, put this to a boolean, put it to true, and this means that if the app is already installed on the device, it will not reinstall it on the device. And then last but not least, you might need to add extra capabilities. Extra capabilities like waiting on a certain activity, and this is something which we normally need to do for Android. Wait for a certain activity. When that activity is loaded, it will then be able to read the capabilities. It will then be able to read the source of the application. So let me add that capability, which will be the app wait activity. That also needs to be a string, and we will pass it here, which will be com.swaglabs_mobile_app.main_activity. This will be the activity it will use to start the app on our Android emulator, and also wait for the source to become available. Then there's also an extra option with Appium Desktop. As you already saw, when I entered all the strings, I got the JSON representation in this part of the screen. But I also have the option just to paste in a JSON blob here, which will be automatically translated to the fields we have here. If I, for example, would now say here, for example, false, if I would click on the save button, the boolean will be changed. So there's an easier way. If you already have the capabilities in a JSON blob, paste them in here. Appium Desktop will translate them automatically for you. Then, before we start the session, we also have the option to store all the capabilities we have here, because if you always need to change this, or if you always need to add this, you will become a little bit, how do you say it, annoyed. So it's always useful to have capabilities that you've already set. So we can now say save as and give it a name. So let's say pixel Pixel 10 and SOS Labs Swag. This is the app, let's say Swag app. This is the saved capability set. Click on save, and if we're lucky, we saw it changing from 2 to 3, and we have the capabilities here. Now you can even alter the capabilities by clicking on this button. You will then open the new set of capabilities. You can change the capabilities, and then you can start the session. So for now, I'm going to start the session by clicking on Start Session. And now let's hope the demo gods really like me and that I've entered all capabilities properly. If we would now already open the Appium logs, you could see all the commands that Appium Desktop is sending to the Appium server to get all the data, to ask for the source, to ask for a screenshot, to ask for all the things that we might want to do. If I would now open the screen, in our case, I would have a white screen because the screenshot itself is not showing what it's showing on the device. This is more of a timing issue. It has to do with the app itself. But if I would now refresh the source by clicking on that button, I would now have the screen on the left with the proper screenshot. And let me just make it a little bit bigger. On the left, you can see the screenshot which Appium Desktop will take for you. In the middle, you will see the source. This is the source translated by Appium and provided here in a tree. And then on the right, you would have selected element. And you might wonder what will be shown here. Well, with Appium Desktop, you could easily explore elements by hovering over them or clicking on them. And then on the right, on the selected element, you will get all the details and all the attributes of that specific element on which you can use. And you can use them to do assertions. For example, is this element displayed, as you can see here at the bottom? Or you could even ask the rectangles of that specific element. What's the position, the X, the Y, the width and the height position of this specific element? You can even do interactions with it. For example, I can tap on it. I can send keys if that element allows me to send keys, and I can even clear the field. So these are all the actions you can already do on this specific element. I can also even select the login button, and I can also tap on that button, and as you can see, the username is required, which is an error message which is shown. And now I would have a new source. When I did an interaction, it got the new source, and it also is showing me the attributes that are on this specific element. As you can also see here, we have timing buttons. And the timing buttons are connected to the locator strategy of finding elements in your application. In this case, Appium Desktop was able to find at least the accessibility ID, which is unique, and also to find the XPath. And by clicking on the get timing, you will get the difference in time, how long it will take to find an element based on an accessibility ID, or how long it took to find an element based on XPath. And in this case, you would see that there's a difference, a pretty big difference, even though it's in milliseconds, but it's 50 milliseconds for the accessibility ID, and it took almost 221 seconds to find the element based on this XPath selector. When you're using iOS, you can also get all those data with the specific locators, selectors, and also the timing. And we will cover that in a few seconds. What you can also see here, and this goes back to the first video where we discussed the drivers. The driver that we're here using is the UI Automator 2 driver. This is a native application. And one of the things that makes Android a little bit faster in comparison to iOS is that the UI Automator 2 driver is only giving you back the elements that are in the view. And to give you a simple example, now in the application itself on my device, I'm only seeing the currently accepted usernames, but I'm not seeing all the information here. I need to scroll to see it. If I would put it back, and if I would now explore the source, I could see this element being highlighted, and the only thing that I get back here is the currently accepted usernames of these applications are. Tap to autofill. If I would now scroll, if I would now refresh my page, I can again explore the text, and as you can see now we've got more elements we now got more elements in our view. But there's also a difference because we now only have the error message, as we can see here. This is the error message, but we don't have the login, the username, and the password element. And this is the biggest difference between the XUI test driver and the UI Automated 2 driver. The Android driver is only giving you back elements which are in the view. So basically all the elements that you could see as a user. This is different in comparison to iOS. So now let's take a look at iOS. Let's stop this session and let's start the Android and the iOS simulator, which is this one. I already prepared this with the saved capabilities. I will use this local simulator. The app is installed. If it is installed, we have the reset set to true. It will not reinstall it. And let's start the session. This will take a little bit longer because Appium needs to translate more information for iOS in comparison to Android. And we just need to wait a few seconds here until the application has been loaded and the source has been shown here. And here we have it. Again, for iOS, we've got the screenshot on the left, we've got the source in the middle, and we've got the selected element on the right. And let us now first explore the tree. And we can already see that we have more attributes here on our tree. And this is the difference between iOS and Android, the difference between the XUI test driver and the UI Automated 2 driver. Because I can basically explore all the data which is on the page. So not only on the view, but also what is below the view. This is the advantage of Appium Desktop, and especially the advantage of iOS, the iOS driver. You will get back more information in comparison to the Android driver. The downside of this is that the translation of all the elements from a UI view, which is the default language for iOS, to XML will cost some time. And this is also something which you will see when you want to go to a selector. If you want to go to an element and want to use different selectors. Let me just use the password field here. Let me just select the password field, the username field, and let me do it like this. This is the test username field that I can use. And as you can see here, we've got the accessibility ID test username and also the XPath. If I would now click on timing, you could also see the difference here. But in comparison to Android, we had a time of around 50 milliseconds. For iOS, because of all the translations, it's taking at least 153 milliseconds for the accessibility ID, but the XPath will take 372. And this has to do with Appium translating the UI views into XML. It already has more elements in comparison to Android, and the translation itself of all those elements will take much more time. So keep that in the back of your mind when you're exploring Android and when you're exploring iOS with Appium Desktop. If you also want to find your elements, think about the locator strategy that you want to use. There are multiple strategies which you can use: accessibility ID and XPath, and sometimes even other locator strategies like the iOS class chain or the iOS predicate string will be provided here, and especially when you found an element which is pretty unique and can be determined by one of the 4 locator strategies for iOS. Now that we've covered this, we now know how to connect to our Android emulator and our iOS simulator. Together with the previous videos, we covered theory and background about Appium, configured an Android emulator and an iOS simulator on a local machine, and I've shown you how to use Appium Desktop with local connected emulators and simulators. In our next video, we're going to cover using different versions of Appium with Appium Desktop, and I hope you enjoyed this video and hope to see you in the next one.